We're continuing the introduction to microeconomics. This is still chapter 1. We're covering key concepts in economics. Each of us makes choices so as to maximize benefits to ourselves. This is just a very frank realization that much of what you and I do is based in self-interest. We do the things that we enjoy most. We value those things. People are basically self-interested. Now, don't think that's the same thing as selfish. Selfish, I'd say, is the ugly aberration of self-interest. We are naturally self-interested. I would say even a measure of self-interest is recognized, even upheld in Scripture, because Jesus said, for instance, you should love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't have an adequate amount of self-love, then you probably find it difficult to love and hold other people in regard. But of course there is a measure of self-interest that goes beyond that, such that you simply don't care about anyone else and you're willing possibly to do whatever it takes to benefit yourself at their expense. So that's not what we're talking about here. Self-interest is something that characterizes all our behavior and really explains a lot of human behavior. We are basically self-interested. We have unlimited wants. Some have even suggested that the insatiability of our desires, of our goals in life, is some measure of our, let's say, the infinite nature of God in us. That is, that we're not satisfied with what is. We want more, and that can be a very good thing. Of course, it can also drive people to do harmful and hateful things to other people. We make decisions by comparing economic costs and benefits, and we make choices such that benefits exceed costs. Every time you and I go shopping, we make decisions based on comparison of what something costs to what benefit we perceive gaining from that. Every time we go to a restaurant and look at a menu and make choices, we're weighing those costs and benefits. And conceivably, at every moment throughout the day, we're making those choices to pay attention in class versus to goof off, to go to class or to skip, to take on that extra job or not. We need to be very careful at this point because economic value is highly subjective. And it's very easy for me to think that the choices that I make, how I value things, is the right way to do it. And that any other way is, that someone's missing the boat or not really clearly thinking through things. There's a place for us to certainly be discriminating and to be able to make value judgments. We just need to realize our own limitations in doing so. Allocation decisions are made at the margin. Another key concept. That is, you and I stand at a given point of consumption with regard to just about any good that you want to discuss, travel, entertainment, education, clothing, for instance. You've got a closet full of clothes and shoes, and so it's not like we're standing naked and looking for something to wear. We've already got some things, or we had just drank a bottle of water, and so since we're not thirsty, having just done so, we'll make decisions to consume a little bit more, and where we stand and what we possess is going to influence how we value how much we desire more of that particular item. The amount that we're willing to pay, therefore, for another unit reflects the perceived value of that unit. What this means with regard to gasoline prices, a few days ago, my wife and I were driving back from Franklin, Tennessee, and I was playing chicken with a gas gauge, as I oftentimes do. That is, trying to save a few pennies here and there, and maybe risking running out of gas. And there's a place I like to stop that's near Decatur, Alabama, Priceville, where the gas is cheaper there than any other place by a few cents. And so I'm thinking, I can pull off if I am so low. It was on the E. And I thought if I come to a place where it's more expensive, I'll probably pull off and just get a gallon or two so that I can then drive to this place further down, drive to Priceville and get gas more cheaply. And so I was reminded of this. I'm not going to buy many more units of it if it's expensive. because I know I can get it more cheaply later on. That 1 gallon may be worth a good bit to me, but I'm not going to buy 5 or 10 gallons at that higher price. We're always making these comparisons at the margin. We consume in such a way to achieve economic efficiency, which occurs when one maximizes net benefits, the total difference between benefits and cost. Just imagine that at any given time I'm looking around and I'm consuming clothing and food and education and entertainment and transportation and all these other things. And if I spend money over here on clothing, it's because that particular purchase represented or provided the best net benefit for me at the time. Net benefit meaning the value minus the cost. And that we're always looking, next time when I have some money, I'm going to make a decision, I might buy food because I've just sort of squared things. I've just made a clothing purchase, and so I'm was in good shape there. Anyway, this occurs. That is, these consumption patterns occur when we consume to the point that marginal benefits equal marginal costs. The notion of marginal benefits and costs will come up and be more meaningful to us later on. Unintended effects. The law of unintended consequences. Economists think in terms of the long-term effects of rules, legislation, societal pressures on human behavior, some of which are unintended or unexpected. Very often it seems in society we perceive a problem and then we address that problem with a solution, but the solution itself produces a new circumstance, a new set of problems, as it were, or changes the landscape. Consider the unintended consequences of seatbelt laws. Some of us are old enough, I am, to remember when we didn't have seatbelt laws, and of course the idea was that people need to be protected in their, as they travel. And so I suppose we would say, well, if you're in your own car, why don't you make that choice? Why do we need to have seatbelt laws? That is, punishments for people that don't observe that. And this is where, there's an argument there, but society has said, because we need to protect people from their own stupidity or short-sightedness or laziness or whatever it might be. But studies have shown that seatbelt laws, that is, that when people put seatbelts on, they tend to feel safer, more secure in their car, in their driving. And so, in fact, they tend to drive more aggressively. And so, in fact, that seatbelt law may actually undermine the person's safety. They may be more reckless because they're wearing a seatbelt. So, some of the benefits perceived in people wearing their seatbelts are mitigated or reduced because people, in fact, take more chances. Another one, required seat purchases for children on airplanes. So there was a push a few years ago to require that any child would have to have their own, traveling on airlines, would have to have their own car seat, just like they do in the car. And which would mean that parents would have to buy tickets for any children that were accompanying them, regardless of their age. And I remember one of the advertisements was it said this. It said, if the child has to be in their safety seat at 50 miles an hour, why not at 500 miles an hour? Well, studies showed that never took off really, as far as I know. And but there were some studies that were done, and of course show that air travel is very, very safe. And so the idea, or let's say the likelihood of a child sitting in a parent's lap is going to be harmed by doing so on an airplane versus travel by car. Car travel is much more risky than air travel. And so requiring seat purchases for children on the airplanes would have meant that more families, because of the greater cost of air travel, buying more tickets, would in fact have induced more people to drive instead, and that would have put them at risk by driving. Minimum wage laws, and this is a very hot topic right now. There are people who believe that the minimum wage should be raised so that people on minimum wage can earn a living doing that. That's something else we will talk about later on when we look at the effects of price set prices or government-regulated minimum and maximum prices for things. But of course, minimum wage laws, some evidence, sound evidence shows that if you raise the minimum wage, in fact, it results in businesses closing or reducing the number of hours for minimum wage workers, or even eliminating jobs of minimum wage workers. Especially when you're dealing with what we would characterize as marginal employees, that is, those without much job experience. Economics as the science of exchange. We'll talk quite a bit about how it is that goods are exchanged in an economy. We might ask the broad question, why do people enter into voluntary exchanges? And the answer is because they believe that they will be better off. Well, that doesn't mean that they always will. You and I all have made purchases that we wish we hadn't made. But ex ante, that is before the transaction itself, we do believe that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have engaged in the transaction. We therefore describe voluntary exchange as win-win. Both parties, neither one being under any compulsion to exchange, believe they're going to be better off by the exchange. And so we call these exchanges win-win because both parties voluntarily engaging in it believe that they will be better off as a result of that exchange. The scope of economics. Microeconomics, that is the economy through a microscope, versus macroeconomics, the broad economic system. The three major questions every economy must answer. First of all, what to produce? What goods and services will it produce? And how much of each one? How much education, transportation? How many computers versus how many cars versus how many pairs of shoes? How to produce it? This is really, the first one, by the way, is a production decision determining what will be produced given the resources available. How to produce it. This is also a production decision that will determine how resources will be most efficiently utilized to produce the desired goods. But as we see, it also has some other implications. And finally, who gets it? This concerns the distribution decision. That is, who's going to get those goods that have been produced. And of course, these are interrelated decisions, because we have to induce someone to produce the goods to begin with. And then those people will expect or demand as a reward for their effort those goods that are produced. And so you see how there's, that is, those who are going to produce the goods someone will determine how they're going to be produced, what inputs will be demanded, and therefore who is going to get, or there's going to be some interplay with that as to who actually gets those things that are produced. It's an interaction of the production and the distribution decision that we want to address later on. The method of economics.